Hi, everyone, and welcome to the VenezuelaAnalysis.com podcast, where we try to answer your questions on Venezuela. I'm Ryan Mallett-Outtrim, a staff writer here at Venezuela Analysis, and I've got with me Rachael Boothroyd Rojas. I think you're pretty much our most experienced, like our senior staff writer on staff right now, more or less.
It makes me sound old, but I'll happily take the time.
I don't know. I mean, you've been reporting with us longer than like anyone else, I think, on our staff right now. I don't mean senior age-wise or anything like that. I mean experience-wise.
Most seasoned.
Yeah, I'm most seasoned reporter. Yeah. So anyway, you're in Caracas, and we've had a ton of questions from readers over the last 2 weeks, and apologies to our readers who sent us questions last week. We have a whole bunch of them that we were meaning to answer this week, but we haven't got around to them. We're not going to get around to it. I'm sorry, but I promise I will do my best to cover these questions in next week's podcast or in January, depending on when we get around to it. But we've just had a flood of people wanting to know what the situation is right now with the money situation in Venezuela. So if anyone who doesn't know, Venezuela's had a very interesting situation this week with a sudden change from the 100 Bolivar bill, which was the highest denomination bill that Venezuela's had in circulation for a very long time. And all of a sudden it's been replaced over the last few days with a coin. So everyone wants to know, what's the situation like? Because this is a pretty big, sudden change. So let's start with good, I guess. Rachael, what do you think this has achieved? Or I don't know. Or where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, to talk about what it's achieved, it's a bit difficult to say, as it's obviously people are still kind of reeling from this, this change, which is quite sudden. I think the most immediate effect that we can see that is ostensibly a reaction to this kind of initiative by the national government is the decrease in the black market value of the dollar, which, as Venezuela Analysis has reported on in like, I think at the end of November, early December, it just went through the roof. So it went from like, I think around 1,100 to about like 4,500. So this is just like this huge jump. And that's kind of over the past 3 or 4 days, that's really started to come down. So it's really basically halved, or more than halved, because it's currently around 2,200, 2,300. So, I mean, there's been a significant kind of decrease there, which people are, attributing to this this initiative by the government to withdraw the $100 100 Bolivar notes. So that's the most kind of immediate effect that we could call positive in terms of the national economy.
Yeah, right. I can imagine if you're on the Colombian border right now with a sack full of 100 Bolivar bills, you're probably not too happy. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long that lasts for. Personally, I'm a little worried, but it's going to be a short-term thing, like it's going to stay low for, a little while, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then we're going to see inflation start to kick back in again. But I hope that's not the case. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it was an initiative that was a shock. It kind of came out of nowhere. Initially the government had said that the kind of 100 Bolivar bills would kind of coexist alongside the new coins and the new notes, etc. Ostensibly, the reason for this having been announced and the kind of short-term nature of the withdrawal of the 100 Bolivar bill, which is, as we said, 72 hours to kind of deposit your notes at private or national banks. And then there's a 5-day window next week to deposit with the national bank. Well, the reason behind that, according to the government, is obviously to take what they're calling the mafias that operate on the border with Brazil and along the border with Colombia, to take them by surprise and to not give them like a sufficient window of time to kind of to come up with strategies, maybe to kind of circumvent government measures. And so, I think in terms of that, it's probably, been really successful or will be successful short term. So, when the government talks about mafias, they're talking about also the forex centres along the border, particularly in Cucuta, who they kind of claim are deliberately speculating against the value of the bolivar. So these are kind of the organisations that the government's looking to hit, as well as illegal organisations which the government are saying are literally smuggling these 100 bolivar bills out of Venezuela. So I think, as a short-term measure, it will probably have a significant impact on these organisations. They're going to lose a lot of their savings. But I think I do share your concern that unless the government is going to address kind of the root causes of the country's economic problems, and I think, and particularly the root causes of inflation, and I think, the most kind of notable kind of causes, as Mark Weisbrot's talked about, the kind of dysfunctional exchange rate system between the bolivar and the dollar, unless some kind of action is taken to remedy those issues, it's going to be a short-term measure. So I don't know whether the government is thinking, well, we'll do this now, and then early next year we'll start to implement other economic changes. But, I do share that concern that unless these kind of these causes that are at the heart of kind of the government's, or the country's economic problems are addressed, it's the long-term impacts of this initiative are not going to be very kind of far-reaching, I guess we could say.
Right. The other thing that we're talking about before we started the show was just how much people agree with it. What do you think? Do you think people generally agree with Maduro that this is that the currency needs to be done for currency, or that this kind of change was necessary, especially I guess the sudden nature of it? What's your take from being around Caracas?
I mean, I guess we have to highlight that being around Caracas, it's kind of like a different dynamic to the rest of the country. So I'm not sure if what I'm about to say is reflective of the whole country. But I mean, in Caracas, I'd say there've been kind of like 3 different reactions. So obviously there's the predictable reaction of the opposition, and people who support the opposition said, no, the country's totally dysfunctional, these made-up mafias which are in the government's head, it's just, to ruin people's Christmas and all other kinds of, the usual kind of discourse that we see from the opposition there, which jumps on absolutely any, initiative by the national government to accuse them of being, totally insane or dysfunctional, failed state, etc. So there's been kind of the mainstream Chavista reaction, which has been to support the government, which has been to recognise that there are these kind of mafias operating along the border. There is also this speculation from the, Colombian forex centres, which is, I don't know if readers know, but the forex centres on the border with Venezuela from Cucuta can actually set their own price for foreign currency independently of Colombia's Bank of the Republic. So due to legislation passed in Colombia in 2000, this is what the government has said is allowing these kind of forex centres to speculate against the Venezuelan bolivar and the national economy. So that has kind of been like the mainstream Chavista reaction has been to kind of applaud the measure taken by Maduro. And actually some people have even kind of said, no, it's not going far enough. We want a complete closure of the border with Colombia again, etc. We need to stop these mafias. And then there's kind of been, I'd say, another section of the population who maybe agree with the initiative in principle, but are really not happy about the kind of how suddenly it's been implemented, and are not happy about the fact that it's been implemented just before Christmas. So there's a lot of uncertainty. People are obviously unable to use the highest denomination note in Venezuela, which is most frequently used just before Christmas. Obviously in the barrios as well, there's a cash economy. Like, I live in a barrio, there's no shop really nearby which has a point of sale, you can pay with your card. Everything you buy is with cash, and so there's this uncertainty, and people are kind of, they're not happy about having been subjected to that, like literally a week before Christmas, and this coming weekend is also the weekend that people tend to travel in Venezuela to be with their families, so transport is certainly an issue at the moment because they, mostly accept cash, for instance, but a lot of kind of, the kind of bus owners, they don't want to accept these 100 bolivar bills, and at the moment there's no replacement, so the coins aren't in circulation, and so there's a lot of uncertainty, and people aren't, necessarily happy about the way this measure has been implemented or the timing of it. I'd say that's just the impression I've got from speaking to people in my barrio. I was having a conversation with people about it last night, and they were just said, dear God, they should have waited until January, so it's not like that people are rejecting the initiative in itself, but they really do think it was not politically wise to have kind of implemented this right at this moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. One thing I was wondering is this is just personally what I was wondering. Have you tried to change money yet at a bank or anything? Or do you know what the process is like?
They're not actually changing money at the banks. So the way it's working at the moment, the government had said you had to go to kind of the banks and deposit your money into your account. So say I had 50,000 bolivars in 100 bolivar notes, and I could go to my bank and deposit those into my account. Now, if it was really high, like say I was walking in with a mattress full of notes and there's like millions of bolivars there, then I would obviously have to account for that money legally. And so this is kind of another kind of element that the government has highlighted of the policy, which they say is going to hit kind of people who are involved in illegal activities, so drug trafficking, etc. So they're not going to be able to justify this money, which will then be confiscated and absorbed back into the economy, the legal economy anyway. And so, the process for that is obviously you have to declare. So you have to declare your money, where you got it from. And so that's been the process up until now. And we've seen these basically really, really huge queues kind of developing for people to deposit money at their local banks. Basically, the government said at the beginning it was just going to be public banks and not private banks, because they've said that the certain banks such as Banesco have been involved in kind of promoting the informal economy and economic sabotage against the government. But then it would appear that they've gone back on that, because now it would appear that private banks, you're also able to deposit at private banks. I think the government changed its mind just due to the sheer kind of practicalities of having millions of people try to deposit their money, just at public banks over a period of 72 hours, which finishes today. And then next week at the BCB, which is the Central Bank of Venezuela, people will be able again to go and deposit money. The government had said initially that they would change the money, so it would be you'd be able to change your 100 bolivar bill for the new coin, but Maduro seems to have said this morning that that that's not going to be the case. People are going to go and deposit again. So the main worry people have is like how long it's going to take for the new coins and the new kind of notes to start making their way into circulation, because until that point people are in a bit of a predicament, because obviously you can't pay with card everywhere, although in Caracas there are certainly a lot of places where you can pay with card, but not all the time. For instance, if you want to pay to use public transport, there's no card facility there. So until they start making their way into circulation, people are a bit stuck in terms of what they do in terms of cash transactions. So there are lower denomination notes. For instance, there's 5 and 10 and 20 and 50, but the cash machines generally don't tend to give you these lower denomination notes. And obviously there's a huge demand for them all of a sudden, because they're the only legal tender at the moment. So those are kind of the issues that people are facing at the moment.
Wait, so are ATMs, are cash dispensers still dispensing mostly just 100 bolivar bills?
I haven't tried to. I think most people's strategy has been not to partake in the queues if you can avoid them. So I actually didn't have a lot of I think when the news hit, we had maybe like six 7,000 bolivars, which is, it's cash, but it's not like, going to break the bank if we don't deposit it. So, we ended up just kind of spending it in the places where people would accept the 100 bolivar notes. And now we're kind of without cash, and we're just kind of waiting for the new notes to come into circulation. But I think people have tried to avoid, the queues if they can avoid it, unless you've got significant savings that you really cannot stand to lose. I think people have been avoiding that. I haven't tried to take cash out because according to everyone I've spoken to, there are huge queues to take money out, which, there have been significant queues over December anyway, because we've seen these issues with credit card, the cyber attacks, which the government has been talking about, and just, people wanting to take cash out for Christmas. So there've been significant queues anyway, but, I think, there's now another kind of element to add to that. So now people are saying there's really there's hardcore queues basically to take cash out, and the cash machines are apparently, according to some friends I spoke to last night and neighbours, the cash points and reports generally on social media, the cash points are still giving 100 bolivar bills. So it's kind of a difficult situation because you can't exactly just go and get the new kind of notes out either. So people are stuck in limbo basically for the moment, which is not great before Christmas, like we said.
Yeah, right. The last question I have, a lot of people want to know is, how does it feel? Does it feel like the economy is working more or less normally, or have things come to a total standstill, or is it somewhere in between? How do you feel about the current situation, at least for now, while we're in limbo?
Well, I think what people have to realise is there's a lot of kind of money and effort goes into this kind of media campaign to depict Venezuela as if it's a total failed state and the economy just doesn't work, and it's just in total meltdown. Venezuelans are really resilient, to be honest, so they will always find kind of a way to get round any kind of situation that's thrown at them. So it's true that, say, maybe some of the smaller shops have closed down. So, for instance, there's a small shop near where I live on the main kind of road, just below my barrio, and they've kind of closed, and some shops have closed because they don't want to accept the 100 bolivar bills, and so they prefer to take the hit as opposed to, or have to kind of have arguments with customers over accepting the 100 bolivar bills. But then in contrast to that, my next door neighbour is a small shop, a small barrio shop, and she kind of sells like sweets, mayonnaise, just bits and bobs, basically, the cheese even, crisps, chocolate and all that. And so she's still open, and she told me that, well, no, I've got a friend who's got another business, and he said he's got to go and deposit the money anyway, so he's going to do me the favour. So I'm still accepting the 100 bolivar notes for the moment. And then there's the big supermarkets, which, as far as I know, are still accepting the 100 bolivar notes, or at least until today. I'm not sure how it's going to be Monday, because, as you know, today is kind of like the end of the 72-hour period where the bolivars were supposed to be legal tender, or the 100 bolivar bills were supposed to be legal tender. So I'm not sure how this dynamic's going to play out next week. But, there's still some places which are accepting 100 bolivar bills, other places which are not. People are still able to pay on card. So, the world's still going round, basically. It doesn't feel like we're on the verge of a total kind of social or economic meltdown. Things feel tense, and there's definitely uncertainty there in the streets. And I think maybe if you were to go to somewhere on the border, maybe, Zulia, I think things would be more tense there because, the border, there tends to be kind of a more cash economy there. Or if you went to somewhere like a rural area where, people tend to use more, cash exchanges, there's not a lot of card payment facilities. So things are probably, a little more panicked there than here. So, it's hard for me to say with me not being there, but just in my experience of having been in places like that where, like I said, people use cash much more often than they do use cards. So, campesino, rural worker, communities, etc. They're going to have a difficulty getting to a private or a public bank, or even the Central Bank of Venezuela, their nearest headquarters. That's going to prove difficult for them. So it's kind of important to mention, I think, that although the government strategy in terms of, or macroeconomic strategy is to hit these mafias, which I think it will do, there are also going to be ordinary Venezuelans who are going to end up paying the price for that strategy as well. So I'm not sure what the political impact of that will be in terms of support for the government.
Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of it is we've just got to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I don't know how helpful what I've said is.
No, I think people would find that really useful. I hope we've answered at least most of the questions that people would have had of us. And yeah, I think it's very useful. So thanks so much for joining me today, Rachel. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening. I hope we answered your questions. As I said, we've got a few outstanding ones, but we're going to try and get around to as much as possible. And if you do have a question, please shoot us a question on our Facebook page or on Twitter or something, or via the email. And yeah, anything you want to know about Venezuela, we'll try to answer it. So thanks so much for joining us for this week's podcast. And everyone, have a great Christmas.
No problem.
See you next time, Rachel.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.